Media is primarily used as a device for conveying a story to its audience. Writing in film, television, or graphic novels tends to revolve around a central theme which serves to guide the action and dialogue. But some writers, directors, or developers really go the extra mile to include elements into their stories that hold true to the world as we know it. Here are 5 of our favourites.
There is plenty in Mass Effect that is, to say the least, unrealistic. From blue space magic to faster than light travel by way of giant glowing tuning forks, Mass Effect is not generally a stellar example of scientific literacy. But what BioWare does get right is the Citadel. The Citadel is a massive space station consisting of 5 arms and a base ring. As the station spins, it creates an artificial gravity effect on the inside of the arms due to centrifugal force. It's essentially a cylinder that's been broken up a bit. This is entirely possible, and it's been used in a variety of other science fiction titles, most notably in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, though the scale that the film uses presents its own set of problems. The game even mentions that the arms and the rings have different apparent levels of gravity, because the force felt is proportional to how far or close you are to the centre of the rotation, meaning the closer Presidium ring feels less gravity, about 0.3 Gs, compared to the arms at 1.02 Gs. And what does this all mean? Well, it means that bouncy castles will be much more fun in the Presidium.
Black holes are, simply put, really weird. They're the most extreme and unintuitive objects in the universe, and astrophysicists have spent lifetimes trying to understand them. When Nobel Prize-winning physicist Dr. Kip Thorne agreed to consult for Interstellar, he stipulated that the film must be as accurate as possible to the science as we know it, which meant that the team at Double Negative VFX had a lot of work to do. Using papers referred to them by Dr. Thorne, Double Negative created a whole new program to render Gargantua. These simulations were in fact so accurate that Kip Thorne used them to write a paper on the new insights it gave into the behaviour of light around black holes. You can't really get more accurate than that.
Fantasy does not generally concern itself with realism. After all, how realistic can a giant fire-breathing magical lizard be? But Fantasy RPG Outward really goes the extra mile. The game tasks you, the player, to balance your levels of hunger, thirst, fatigue, and even temperature, all in order to survive this harsh world. One of the most accurate elements of the game, however, is how well it predicts the amount of time we'd actually last if we took off on a grand fantasy adventure of our own, which is to say, probably not for very long. And if we're being honest with ourselves, most of us would either freeze to death, or starve to death, or overheat, or run into some horrible monster and immediately die. The list goes on.
Space is hard. It's hard to live in, it's hard to move through, and it's hard to depict accurately. Most shows or movies make it a bit floaty and call it a day, but not The Expanse. We simply don't have time in this video to talk about everything The Expanse does right when it comes to space, so we'll just mention one. The ships of The Expanse have their decks arranged perpendicular to the direction of their thrust, a bit like a building. This means that when they use a only slightly sci-fi magic Epstein drive that can provide constant acceleration, the people on the ship feel the deck constantly pushing up on them, which is functionally identical to normal gravity. The ships in The Expanse will accelerate for half of their trip. Then, they'll spin the ship around and burn in the opposite direction, decelerating, which helpfully makes more artificial gravity. This does mean, however, that if the ship isn't accelerating, there is no gravity, which, you guessed it, The Expanse accurately shows.
Okay, so a game on an alien planet with horrible sea monsters and Star Trek replicator technology isn't all that realistic, scientifically speaking, but there's one thing that Subnautica does extremely well. This ecological biome matches 7 out of the 9 preconditions for stimulating terror in humans, namely thalassophobia. Subnautica starts out as a standard, if novel, underwater survival crafting game, but quickly evolves into a horror game worthy of Hitchcock himself. Subnautica is brilliantly terrifying, and much like Outward, rather accurately depicts how long any of us would last on a hostile, alien, giant monster-infested water world.
That was our list of the most accurate elements in media. Now we have a few honourable mentions to finish the video. Kerbal Space Program. A game so complicated you actually need to be a rocket scientist, well at least an amateur one, to play it right. So, pretty realistic. Skyrim Space Program? Speaking of space programs, remember the first time you saw a giant in Skyrim and thought, yeah, I'm the protagonist, I can take it. Turns out, most people can't beat up a 9-foot tall giant. Who'd have thought? So, how was the list? Do you think we've missed anything? If so, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video, and we'll see you next time for more Fiction Talk.